I told you to stay away.
That's never gonna happen.
Stop.
Not until I know you're gonna be okay.
The new X-Men movie is moving forward fast, with Hunger Games writer Michael Leslie working on the script. 2026-2027 is going to be wild. Jean Grey. Jean Grey has always been a cornerstone of the X-Men, both in the comics and across various adaptations. But somehow, when it comes to live-action films, her most iconic arc keeps missing the mark. The Dark Phoenix saga is supposed to be a monumental, emotional journey, yet both X-Men, The Last Stand, and Dark Phoenix failed to capture its power and depth. It's almost impressive how such a legendary story got botched not once, but twice. So maybe it's time Marvel flips the script and finally gives Jean her due. And how? Not just by making her part of the team, but by giving her an entire trilogy of her own. By taking that route, the MCU could finally explore the vast and cosmic elements of her story, like the Phoenix Force, the Shi'ar Empire, and her entanglement with the Hellfire Club. These are all key to truly telling Jean's tale the right way. Plus, a solo franchise means she wouldn't have to share the spotlight with Wolverine, which always seemed to be the case in the Fox films. That alone would set the MCU apart and give Jean the focus she absolutely deserves. Franklin and Valyria. The introduction of Reed Richards and Sue Storm's child in the Fantastic Four First Steps is already stirring up speculation, and honestly, it makes perfect sense why. This isn't just a sweet family subplot meant to emphasize that Reed and Sue are the heart of Marvel's first family. It's more than that. It's a soft launch for some major players in the MCU's future, especially as Marvel gears up for Avengers Secret Wars and beyond. Because when you think about what comes next, it's hard not to connect the dots leading straight to Franklin and Valyria Richards becoming key figures in Marvel's Mutant Saga. The first steps in the movie's title probably don't just refer to the Fantastic Four team stepping into the MCU. They're also a nod to the literal first steps of the baby Sue is expecting. That alone is a clever bit of storytelling, but the deeper implication is that this baby could be Franklin Richards, a character who, at least in the comics, has reality-warping powers on par with cosmic beings. That's a big deal. It's why aging Franklin up between the Fantastic Four First Steps and Avengers Doomsday would be a smart move. It allows Marvel to use him in ways that align with his massive role in the Secret Wars comic storyline, where he helped rebuild the multiverse. What makes this setup even more intriguing is that the Fantastic Four reportedly aren't from Earth 616, but from a separate retro-style universe. That means the Fantastic Four First Steps might function as a kind of farewell to their original world. Galactus is already looming large in the trailer, with destruction seemingly inevitable. So if their home world is about to be devoured, then their escape to Earth 616 would be their only shot, and it might not be a clean transition. If Franklin is separated during this multiversal hop and lands in Earth 616 years earlier, it could explain how he shows up as an older, more capable hero in Avengers Doomsday, while still technically being Sue and Reed's baby from the previous film. This time travel or multiversal slip would also give Marvel a neat way to introduce Valyria Richards later on. Even though Franklin is the focus now, Valyria, who's often portrayed as a child genius, isn't far behind in terms of importance. With the door to the multiverse wide open, Marvel has the flexibility to bring her in however they choose. Maybe she's born later in the main timeline, or maybe she too gets caught in the time loop and shows up in the future. Either way, her connection to Franklin is essential, because the two often operate as a brilliant brother-sister duo, and their dynamic could easily anchor an upcoming Franklin and Valyria movie. But it's Franklin's mutant potential that's especially juicy for the MCU right now. The X-Men are on the horizon again, and even though the comics recently retconned Franklin's mutant status, the MCU could go a different route. In fact, it makes sense for Marvel to lean into Franklin's mutant identity to help bridge the gap between the Fantastic Four and the mutants. It's an easy in. He could be the first major mutant introduced in the post-Secret Wars era who isn't a legacy Fox character, helping to launch the new wave of X-Men films in a meaningful way. So although the Fantastic Four First Steps might seem like a self-contained origin-style film, it's clearly setting up a bunch of long-term moves. With Galactus bringing the doom, and the team hurtling through the multiverse to survive, their baby, most likely Franklin, becomes the thread tying it all together. And if Marvel does go the route of aging him up, Placing him in the heart of the Secret Wars finale and then exploring his mutant heritage, there's a natural opportunity for him and Valyria to headline their own story. A Franklin and Valyria movie could be Marvel's way of blending family, science fiction, and mutant identity into a single narrative. It wouldn't just extend the Fantastic Four's legacy, it could also be the next step in evolving the MCU beyond its multiverse saga into a full-blown mutant saga. Do you think Marvel's already got this roadmap in place? Cyclops. So with the recent Avengers Doomsday set photos making the rounds on X, fans were quick to notice James Marsden's Cyclops chatting it up with none other than Magneto, who by the way is in full classic costume. It's an exciting sight for longtime fans of the X-Men films, but at the same time it's a bit of a bittersweet moment, because we already know what's coming. Most of the old Fox X-Men characters are going to be wiped out by Dr. Doom's army and Doom himself. Now that might sound harsh, but it actually opens the door for something really important, the chance for Marvel to finally reboot the X-Men properly. That means closing the book on Fox's version of the X-Men and kicking off something entirely new after Avengers Secret Wars. It's a solid way to clean the slate and introduce a brand new mutant saga under the Marvel Studios banner. And if Marvel wants to do it right, one of the first characters they really need to get right is Cyclops. Scott Summers has always been a core member of the X-Men, and more importantly, their field leader. But let's be honest, neither James Marsden nor Ty Sheridan were ever given much to work with. The character came off a bit flat in the Fox films, even though he's supposed to be one of the most important X-Men. Thankfully, Marvel Studios' X-Men 97 changed that. The animated show gave us the most compelling version of Cyclops we've seen in years, showing that Kevin Feige and his team understand what makes the character tick. And that's promising, because Cyclops deserves more than just being the guy in the background of Wolverine's story. He has the potential to anchor a solo film and lead the next generation of mutants into the MCU. There's so much to explore with him, from his strained relationship with his father, Corsair, to his complex dynamic with his brothers, Alex and Gabriel. These are storylines with real emotional weight, and a Cyclops solo movie could finally dive deep into them. Now you might be wondering, why start the whole new mutant saga with Cyclops? Well, think back to how the MCU's Phase 1 began. It didn't just throw all the Avengers into one film. It started with solo stories, Iron Man, Hulk, Thor, and gradually built up to the big team-up. It worked then, and it could absolutely work now. Instead of stuffing a bunch of mutants into one film, the MCU can take its time and introduce key characters like Cyclops in standalone films. That way, fans actually get a chance to connect with them before they're part of a bigger team. Plus, it's the perfect opportunity to shift away from the old Fox formula, where Wolverine and Professor X were always front and center. That dynamic is played out, and fans are ready for something fresh. Bringing Cyclops into the spotlight would not only honor his comic book roots, but also allow Marvel to finally do justice to a character who's been underused for far too long. It's a clean break and a solid step forward for the franchise. Gambit. Now that we've talked about Cyclops, let's shift gears to another fan favorite, Gambit. If there's one X-Men character that fans have been clamoring for, it's Remy LeBeau. And thanks to Marvel's Avengers Doomsday livestream, we now know that Channing Tatum is officially joining the MCU as Gambit. It's a move that has fans seriously excited, and for good reason. See, Tatum was originally cast as Gambit years ago, and his solo movie was in development for what felt like forever. But that project never got off the ground, and eventually it was shelved entirely. That could have been the end of the road for Tatum's Gambit, but thanks to Ryan Reynolds and the Deadpool and Wolverine crew, we finally got to see him in action, and fans absolutely loved it. Tatum's version of Gambit quickly became a standout, and he's even teased that there have been talks about finally doing that solo movie. Originally, it was pitched as a bit of a love story, which actually fits pretty well with who Gambit is as a character. He's got that charming, roguish vibe, but there's also real depth beneath the surface. He's not just some smooth-talking thief, he's a guy with a complicated past, moral gray areas, and a huge heart when it comes to the people he cares about. That's why it makes total sense to have Gambit be the second major character to lead a film in the new mutant saga. After Cyclops lays the groundwork, Gambit could give the saga a whole different flavor. Where Cyclops brings leadership and emotional depth, Gambit brings style, grit, and romantic drama. And let's be real, he's long overdue for the spotlight. The Fox version of Gambit, played by Taylor Kitsch in X-Men Origins Wolverine, didn't do the character any favors. He barely had a backstory, and fans didn't get a chance to connect with him. In contrast, the comics, like Gambit #1, give us a much better sense of who Remy LeBeau really is. He's got that lovable rogue energy, but there's always a sense that he's carrying some kind of emotional baggage. As writer Mark Guggenheim once described him, Gambit is basically a slightly more morally compromised Han Solo. That's exactly the kind of character the MCU could use right now, someone with swagger, mystery, and depth. And then there's his relationship with Rogue. It's one of the most compelling parts of Gambit's story. Rogue's powers make physical touch incredibly dangerous. She can absorb memories, powers, and even a person's life force if the contact is too long. So imagine being madly in love with someone you can't touch. That kind of tension adds so much emotional weight to their dynamic. Even though Gambit comes off as confident and flirty, Rogue often keeps him at arm's length. But there's real affection between them, and that push-pull could make for some seriously emotional storytelling on the big screen. If Marvel decides to make Rogue a key part of Gambit's solo film, or at least set her up for a future sequel, it could be a total game-changer. Not only would it give us a new kind of superhero love story, but it would also ground the larger mutant saga in very human, relatable stakes. The combination of action, romance, and emotional conflict could make Gambit's movie one of the most memorable in the new lineup. So between Cyclops and Gambit, Marvel has a chance to kick off the mutant saga in a way that feels fresh, grounded, and true to the spirit of the comics. Instead of repeating what Fox did, or diving headfirst into ensemble chaos, the MCU can take its time, tell great stories, and build towards something bigger. Because even though we're saying goodbye to the Fox-era mutants, we're also opening the door to something even more exciting, a whole new chapter for the X-Men in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Bishop. Then there's Bishop, a time-traveling, no-nonsense warrior from a brutal future. He's the kind of character who can dramatically expand the MCU's scope. Bishop grew up in a dystopian timeline where mutants were imprisoned, and he eventually travels back in time to stop that fate from unfolding. His solo movie could act as a post-X-Men film that ties directly into a larger arc. Because of his future knowledge, Bishop could serve as a warning for what's to come, offering a grim preview of how things could go if humanity and mutants clash. He's the perfect character to bring urgency to the X-Men's mission and add some real stakes to the MCU's mutant future. Rogue. Now imagine following up Jean's trilogy with a deeper dive into Rogue, because after the huge reaction to X-Men '97, it's clear fans are craving more from her. That animated series did a fantastic job putting Rogue front and center, giving her the emotional weight she never quite got in the Fox movies. And with Channing Tatum's Gambit now confirmed for Avengers Secret Wars, the timing couldn't be better to bring Rogue into the spotlight in a big way. A solo Rogue film could peel back all the layers of Anna Marie's character, her difficult relationship with her parents, her time with Mystique and Magneto, and the emotional impact of her powers, which make physical contact almost impossible. Those themes are incredibly compelling and relatable, and they'd allow audiences to connect with her beyond the cool flying and super strength. From there, future appearances could tap into her chemistry with Gambit and show her gradually learning to control and accept her abilities. Psylock. Speaking of complex characters who deserve another shot, Psylock is just waiting for the right intro. Remember that little tease in Avengers Endgame where Peggy Carter mentions Braddock hasn't checked in recently? That's no coincidence. It could be the perfect way to plant the seeds for both Captain Britain and his sister, Betsy Braddock, aka Psylock. Psylock's story is one of the most unique in the X-Men lineup. She starts as a British telepath and eventually becomes a martial arts powerhouse after her mind is transferred into the body of the assassin Quanon. It's wild, it's messy, and it's exactly the kind of complicated backstory the MCU could do justice to, especially now that they've been dipping into multiversal storytelling. This could lead to a narrative where Betsy's grappling with her identity, her brother's legacy as Captain Britain, and the darker corners of the mutant world, like the Hellfire Club. If they cast someone like Anna Sawai, whose work in Shogun shows she can handle both action and emotional depth, Psylock could finally get the respect she deserves, and with her connections to cosmic and mystical elements, she'd be a great addition to stories stretching beyond Earth. Beast. Now switching gears a bit, Beast has already snuck into the MCU, if only for a quick cameo. Kelsey Grammer's return in the Marvels cracked the door open, and it's hard not to wonder if Marvel might be considering a bigger return for Hank McCoy. Especially since there was already a solo film in the works before Disney bought Fox, X-Men Fear the Beast. That scrapped project was supposed to show Beast battling Wendigo with Wolverine, all while transforming into a more powerful and more dangerous version of himself. The idea of a Mega Beast serum is honestly too good to waste. The MCU could borrow this concept and expand on it, exploring Beast's internal conflict between intellect and primal instinct. With his scientific background, he could even serve as a link between the X-Men and the broader MCU's tech genius crowd. Think Shuri, Bruce Banner, and even Reed Richards. Nightcrawler. On the darker, more introspective side of things, there's Nightcrawler, one of the most underused characters in live action so far. But the potential is massive. Kurt Wagner is visually one of the coolest mutants, with his teleportation abilities and devilish appearance, but it's his heart and faith that really make him special. A Nightcrawler solo film could take a more mature direction. It might follow two timelines, one showing his youth in the circus and his tragic clash with his adoptive brother, and another tracking his path into the X-Men. Because of his appearance, Nightcrawler has often been hunted or misunderstood, and his struggle with self-acceptance would resonate in a big way. Plus, an R-rated take could allow the MCU to push boundaries, embracing darker, more psychological storytelling while showing off Kurt's full power in brutal, choreographed action scenes. The blend of heart, horror, and heroism could set his solo film apart from anything we've seen so far. Even though the official MCU X-Men movie is still a bit down the line, it's pretty clear that Marvel has been planting the seeds for a mutant renaissance. Between the X-Men '97 revival, cameos in the Marvels, and those subtle name drops and musical cues, the groundwork is there. What's exciting is how many solo stories are just waiting to be told, each one filled with drama, action, heart, and world building that could make the X-Men side of the MCU just as expansive and compelling as the Avengers ever were. And that's that for today's video. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one.